Hello everyone, it's Scott. We're back for our penultimate day of Modern Horizons 3 spoilers. We got a lot of interesting cards to talk about, so let's dive in to Modern Horizons 3. So our first card is Party Thrasher for 1 and a red mana. You get a Lizard Wizard, that's a 1/4, and non-creature spells you cast from exile have Convoke. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, you may discard a card. If you do, exile the top 2 cards of your library, then choose one of them. You may play that card this turn. So a very interesting card here where you're able to convoke things into play if they're in exile, and Party Thrasher has an automatic way for you to do that. So I think this has got some playability in the right kind of deck. Next, we've got Invert Polarity. For 2 blue and a red mana, you get an instant, and you can choose target spell, and then flip a coin. If you win the flip, gain control of that spell, and you may choose a new target for it. If you lose the flip, counter that spell. So, very nice card here. I think, any of our Is It Phoenix decks might want this in it as a way of copying one of their opponent's spells and gaining control of it, or countering it is the worst case scenario. So I think this is a card that we'll see play in Modern. Next, we've got Kozilek's Command for X and 2 colorless mana. You get a Kindred instant. That's an Eldrazi, and you get to choose 2. Target player creates X01 colorless Eldrazi spawn creature tokens with sacrifice this creature to add colorless mana. Target player scries X, then draws a card. Exile target creature with mana value X or less, or exile up to X target cards from a graveyard. So again, flexibility within this, I think makes this definitely something that we'll see play in Modern. Next, we've got Ripples of Undeath. For 1 and a black mana, you get an enchantment, and at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, you get to mill 3 cards. Then you may pay 1 and 3 life. If you do, you get to put a card from among those into your hand. So nice ability to dig through your deck. You're getting things into your graveyard. So I think this would go certainly with any of our graveyard decks as a way to get additional things into your graveyard. And then that ability to pay 1 mana and then pay you that 3 life to go ahead and get things out that you need for your game plan to go forward. So I think this has definitely got some playability in that style of deck. Next, we've got Monumental Stone Row. It's a land. Monumental Stone Row enters the battlefield tapped unless you control the plains. It taps for white mana. And for 2 and 2 white mana, you get to look at the top 5 cards of your library, and you may reveal a historic card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So I think this is definitely a card that's going to see play, because any white deck would like this card in it. As long as you've got plains, it's going to come into play on tap. And then as the game progresses and you've got additional mana available, then you can start digging through your deck for cards that you need, as long as you've got your deck set up in a way that's going to give you artifacts, legendary creatures, sagas, and then you'll be able to take advantage of that by getting a historic spell every turn that you can activate this. Next, we've got Amphibian Downpour for 2 and a blue mana. You get an enchantment, that's an aura. It has flash and storm, and when you cast the spell, copy it for each spell cast before it this turn. You may choose new target for the copies. Copies become tokens. So you get to enchant a creature. An enchanted creature loses all abilities and is a 1/1 frog creature with base power and toughness 1/1. So I think this is, the fact that this storms is really nice, because it's going to allow you to play a couple spells earlier in the hand and then cast this and then make 2-3 copies of it, and really take advantage of that by turning all your opponent's creatures into 1/1 frog creatures that have no abilities. Next, we've got Eldrazi Linebreaker for 1, a colorless and a red mana. You get an Eldrazi creature. That's a 3/3 with Devoid. It has Trample. And at the beginning of combat on your turn, target creature you control gains haste and gets plus X plus 0 until end of turn, where X is number of Eldrazi's you control. So this is clearly meant to be in an Eldrazi deck, and I think there will be an Eldrazi deck that we will see certainly with the additions that we're getting from Modern Horizons 3. I don't think it's going to be out of the um, realm of possibility that we do have a dedicated Eldrazi deck as a result of these cards, and this is just another good card to put in that deck. And at the beginning of combat on your turn, you can even give Eldrazi Linebreaker that haste ability as well. So I think because of that, this is a really, really powerful card in Modern. Next, we've got Savine's Reclamation, which is a reprint where we've seen this in multiple commander sets before. And you get it for 2 and a white mana. You get a sorcery, return target permanent card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. If the spell was cast from a graveyard, you may copy the spell and may choose a new target for the copy. So it's got that flashback ability for 4 and a white mana. So the first time you do it, you can bring 1 card back with mana 3 value or less. And then the second time you do it, you get to bring 2. So that's a pretty powerful ability. And I think in Modern, probably not strong enough for main deck playability, but there might be a circumstance where you'd want this as potentially a sideboard card. Next, we've got Springheart Nantuko. For 1 and a green mana, you get an enchantment creature that's an insect monk and a 1/1. It has Bestow for 1 and a green mana. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1, and it has landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay 1 and a green mana. If Springheart Atuko is attached to a creature you control, if you do, create a token that's a copy of that creature. If you didn't create a token this way, create a 1/1 green insect creature token. So very powerful card. I mean, we already know there's already a modern Enchantress deck, and this I think falls right into that, because whether you are casting it as a 1/1 creature and then you're going to take advantage of the ability here to create tokens that are a copy of everything, if it's attached to something, or if you're just creating 1/1 green insect creature tokens, that's a lot of value on the card. And I think because of that, we'll see Modern play. Next, we've got some lower rarity cards that we saw today that I want to quickly dive through. So first, we've got Ral, the Implicit Mage, for 3 and 2 red mana. So in Chapter 1, Ral, the Implicit Mage, deals 2 damage to each creature and planeswalker your opponent controls. So that's a really nice ability that it's not affecting you. So your creatures will be able to survive this. Hopefully your opponents will be taken out by it, certainly hopefully hurting their planeswalkers. On Chapter 2, you may discard a card. If you do, you get to exile the top 2 cards of your library, and you may play them until the end of your next turn. And then on Chapter 3, you get to create a Spellgore Weird token. It's a 2 mana and 1 red 2/2 weird creature with whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Spellgorger Weird. So probably not good enough to play in Modern, but certainly in Limited, this is a card that we're going to see play with, because it's going to do a lot of damage to creature decks with the abilities that it's got. Next, we've got Furnace Hellkite. For 5 and 2 red mana, you get an artifact creature that's a dragon and is a 5/5, and it has affinity for artifacts, where this costs 1 less to cast for each artifact you control. So this would be something that would be in an Artifacts Matter deck, and it does have flying. So, and it also has the ability to pay 1 red mana, and Furnace Hellkite gets +1 until the end of turn. So I can see this going into an artifact creature deck or an artifact deck, because getting a 5/5, that has flying, probably not paying anywhere near the 7 mana that it costs, I think is a really powerful ability. And this is something that I think we'll see some play, certainly in affinity style decks. Next, we've got Ondu Not Master for 2, a white and a black mana. You get a core rogue with lifelink, that's a 2/2. And whenever another modified creature you control dies, put 2 +1/+1 counters on undo not master. And it also has an adventure. Throw a line for a white and a black mana. You get a sorcery, and you can distribute 2 +1/+1 counters among 1 or 2 creatures. And that will give you those modified creature that you need for Ondu's ability to activate. So I think there is some playability for this in Modern if you're in a counters matter deck. Next, we've got Static Prison. For a white mana, you get an enchantment, and when Static Prison enters the battlefield, exile target non-land permanent an opponent controls until Static Prison leaves the battlefield. You get 2 energy, and at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, sacrifice Static Prison unless you can pay 1 energy. So for this to see any Modern play at all, it's going to have to be in a dedicated energy deck, because I don't think taking out something for early in the game because you've got a white mana and then only being able to remove for a couple of turns makes a lot of sense in Modern. Next, we've got Consigned to Memory. For a blue mana, you get an instant with Replicate 1. Whenever you cast the spell, copy it for each time you paid its replicate cost. You may choose new target for the copies. And you get to counter target triggered ability or colorless spell. But there might be situations where you're trying to counter abilities as well. So I can see that this has some playability in the right kind of deck. Next, we have Gravedigg. For 1 and a black mana, you get a sorcery. A target player gets to create a 2/2 black zombie creature token, or you can return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. And it has Entwine for 2, and you can choose both if you pay the Entwine cost. So for 4 mana, you get a 2/2 zombie, and you also get to return a card that's a creature from your graveyard. So, for a common, this is certainly a common that you're going to want to be considering to play in Limited. Next, we've got another one of our NDFCs, and we've got Bogart Trawler. For 2 and a black mana, you get a goblin. That's a 3/1, and when Bogart Trawler enters the battlefield, exile target player's graveyard. So I think this is nothing more than a sideboard card probably, but the ability to exile your opponent's graveyard is powerful because there are so many decks in Modern that are using things with the graveyard or doing things with their graveyard. So I think this is going to be something that does see some play. And on the back of it, you get Bogart Bog, and as Bogart Bog enters the battlefield, you can pay 3 life. If you don't, it enters the battlefield tapped, and it's going to provide black mana for you. And let's move on to some artifacts for the day, and we get Idol of False Gods. For 2 mana, you get a Kindred artifact. That's an Eldrazi. For 1 and a colorless mana, you can create a 0/1 colorless Eldrazi spawn creature token with sacrifice this creature to add colorless mana. And whenever another Eldrazi you control dies, put a +1/+1 counter on Idol of False Gods. As long as Idol of False Gods has 8 or more +1/+1 counters on it, it's a 0/0 creature in addition to its other types, and has Annihilator too. So I think this is definitely a card that really wants to be in an Eldrazi deck. So hopefully you can, as the game progresses, you play this early, you go ahead and create those colorless Eldrazi spawn tokens. You're sacrificing them to create additional mana. And then every time you do that, you get a +1/+1 counter. And hopefully over the course of the game, you get to your 8, and then you'll be able to attack with this for 8 and Annihilator 2. And that's a powerful ability, especially when you can do this in the mid to late game. And it gives another threat that your opponent has to worry about. And we also had Junk Diver. For 3 mana, you get an artifact creature. That's a bird with flying and is a 1/1. And when Junk Diver dies, return another target artifact card from your graveyard to your hand. So I think this is nothing more than a limited card, and it would probably have to be in something that is dedicated to artifacts. Otherwise, it's really not going to be that playable. All right, and those were our cards for today from Modern Horizons 3. Tomorrow, we should see the rest of the set. So we'll see our last mythics and rares and our other cards, and we'll come back with another spoiler video for those. And thanks for staying to the end of the video. Remember to like and subscribe to get further content like this throughout Modern Horizons 3 season and other sets as we move forward. And I'll be doing some top 10 videos as the week progresses. So thanks, and I'll see you next time.